We are glad you're here today and glad to get into the message this morning. Last week, I want to take a second. Let's give it up for Colin. He preached last week for the first time. I want to say this. We got some young guys around here. Noah, Colin, some future leaders in the church. And I want us to acknowledge as a community, we're very blessed to have young people that are hungry to teach and get into the Word. There are a lot of churches, statistically, in our country that are dying because there's not enough young people stepping into ministry roles and doing things. And we are very blessed to have two people that are hungry to learn and hungry to teach. And so I am grateful for them. I'm grateful to have young voices in our church, different perspective. I'm getting old, so we got to have some young people keeping it young. I ain't that old yet. I still got skinny jeans on. I'm going to rock it as long as I can. Ain't going back to the boot cut. Everyone's trying to bring boot cut jeans back. Heck no. We're leaving that in the early 2000s. But I am grateful for those guys. So give it up for Colin one more time. He was nervous. And then on Wednesday, our young adult ministry launched. And I think there were around 40 people here Wednesday night just worshiping, just hanging out. Even afterwards for like an hour, everyone just sat and ate pizza in the lobby and just spent time together. It was really cool atmosphere in here. So be praying for them on Wednesdays. If you know a college-age student or someone, invite them out here Wednesday nights. Lots of cool stuff. But I want to get in this morning. We started a series last week called Something's Missing. And we started this series talking about things in our life that we tend to neglect, that we tend to set aside, even maybe shelf in some ways, because we think that this is just the season that I'm in, or this is just what I have to do. And so we shelf these things in our lives that God is actually, that God actually designed for us, that He desires for us. And we think like, I can just do without this. And what we find is there are voids in our life because of the things that we neglect. And so last week, Colin led us into this passage, and he talked about the idea of community and what God created us to be in community with one another, to disciple one another, to be in relationship with one another, and not to forsake that and set it aside. Even as we come together on Sunday, the design of Sunday gathering is so that we can worship together. We can be in one accord. And so the idea of community, Sunday is not good enough for you because how many of y'all know you can come in on Sunday, you can hide, you can sit in the back, all my back row people, you can kind of slide in, slide out. God desires deep relationship. And so Colin led us through that. Go back and listen to it. It was a very good talk. And I want to continue this conversation today. I want to continue this idea that there are things within us that we need. There are things that are missing in our lives at times. Ever felt like just something's off? Something's just missing. Something isn't hitting right. And so we begin to examine our lives. And we begin to question, like, is this what I should be doing? Is this? For me, I'm trying to be better about saying no. Anybody like that? Like you just want to do things as like, even as a pastor around church, you're like, well, I have to say yes to everything, right? Like this person. And sometimes I'm like, no, I need to go be a dad. I need to be with my family. I need to say no to things. And some of y'all know that tension of saying no. It's hard. And so we all get into these things where we're like, oh, like I just feel burnt out, or I feel like I'm doing too much. And so you begin to examine things in your life, and you're like, oh, I need to take this away. I need to say no. I need to not do this, which is great, which needs to happen. But unfortunately, we end up filling that no with something else, right? We say like, no, I need to pull back. For me, I was just talking with someone this week from our church, and they were like, we're so busy, we need to say no, I need to do less. And I'm like, okay, so what are you guys like, what are you doing? Are you taking like the week? They're like, oh no, we're going camping, and then we're going on family vacation. And I'm like, well, that sounds like, and like, no, it's not rest at all. There's like 50 people in there. It's crazy. I'm like, okay, so what are you doing? Like, oh, we got sports this day and this day. And you just fill up your schedule with so many things. And then we wonder why we get to the end and we're like, we're just so burnt out. Like I have no margin in my life. And I was like, I feel you. I understand. I'm trying to say, and listen, I am an ally with you. I am one of these people. I was like, I'm trying to do the same thing too. I said, Kara loves soccer. And I'm like, we're not playing soccer this fall. We're going to say no. I was like, I'm saying no. And all of a sudden I start getting text messages like, Brent, you going to coach? Brent, you coming back for soccer? And I'm like, no, I'm not even answering. I'm ghosting them because I know what's about to happen. I'm like, no, we're not doing soccer. And everyone starts asking me. And I'm like, you know what ended up happening? I even made it through the deadline. I was like, I made it through the deadline. I'm safe. And teams came out. And my daughter's Highland team, they were like, we don't have a coach. And there's one empty roster spot still. I got peer pressured into saying yes. You know what I was doing on Saturday? I was out in 85 degree, like yelling at little third grade girls to run down the field. I'm brutal. I'm like kicking and screaming. I'm Will Ferrell. No mercy. Breaking clavicles. Like throwing bows. I'm out there yelling. I'm doing the same thing that I said I wasn't going to do. And how often do we do that? We're like, I'm creating margin for me to rest, to do less, to just sit, and we just take that space and we don't know what to do with ourselves, so we just throw something else in. Now, I love coaching soccer. I love it. It's fun. I'm probably too intense, but we're the best team in Sylvania, and we dominate everything, and I'm going to stand by it. We make little kids cry. That's okay. Kids need to learn to lose, and I'm here to teach them. But I love it, but it's interesting as I was thinking about that, how often do we do these things and we fill this margin in our lives with things that we should say no to. And we try to fill them up with more and more and more. And this morning I want to talk about the idea of rest. I want to talk about this idea of slowing down because I would imagine every single person in this room feels this tension, maybe even daily. The tension of rest. The tension of slowing down, of doing less. And I think we have this problem, like I said, where we try to slow down, we try to say no, but we don't know how to just leave the space empty. It's always, where can we go today? Even yesterday, like we were sitting around, Kara was at a birthday party, got home from soccer, and we were sitting there, and we were like fooling, Logan's playing Legos, we're resting, and I'm like, we got to go to Costco. Like, we got to do something. I'm like, and nobody goes to Costco on a Saturday afternoon. That's like a death trap. That's like, that's laying it all, that's like going to the Kroger over on Secor. Like, it's Hunger Games, we're going in. Some of y'all know if you've ever been to that Kroger. No one does these things. And I'm like, we got to go do something. Lauren's like, what do we need at Costco? I'm like, I don't know. Let's just go. She was like, okay. So we walked down all the aisles, John Cruise style. I was looking for sales. I was like, we need a blender. She's like, no, we don't need a blender. I'm like, okay. But we fill space. We don't know how to just sit. We never really slow down, and we fill our lives with more and more and more. And so I began to ask the question, why do we live this way? Why do we operate this way? And this is what I think. This is why I think we fill our lives with so much, is we tend to overestimate our importance. We tend to overestimate how important we really are. So we begin to think things like, if I don't get it done, no one will get it done. Or even like my daughters, if I don't coach the team, no one's going to coach the team. That team is going to play. They're going to find a coach. But I have to be the one to do it. We tend to overestimate the value and the importance of what we do. And here's what I mean by this, is all of us tend to think if I don't do it, more specifically, if I don't do it now, it will never get done. Anybody like that? Like, you're like, I have to do it now. It'll never get done. And so we begin to fill our lives up, and we think like, we have to go to Costco right now or we'll never go to Costco. And instead of resting and sitting and being together, we just do and do and do. What we tend to do is we find ourselves getting things done faster, but not better. We find ourselves getting things done very fast, but a lot of times in the long run, it tends to not be better. And here's the first thing, if we're going to talk about rest, is faster does not always equal better. Now, this one is hard for me because if you've ever done a project with me, I'm like, let's just go. We don't need to measure things. It'll figure it. Sam, we built some stuff downstairs. I'm like, Sam's my energy. We just go fast on things. We'll figure it out later. But we think this idea that faster equals better. And maybe you're like me. I tend to hurt myself a lot. All the time. Like, my hands are filled with scars. Sam, we were downstairs, and literally, he'd be like, you already are bleeding? Within 5 minutes of any project, I have cut myself open, or I've done something. I'm duct taping wounds shut, because it's that ADHD. I'm just fast. I'm moving. Let's go. We don't got time to plan. I'm like, we need to burn stuff. Like, I showed up at the young adult cookout. I'm like, we got to burn. Let's throw the whole plywood sheet on. It's dark out. The fire department won't see. I'm like, let's get it done quick. I'm in that fast camp. I'm like, let's just go. And what ends up happening is that we get a job done, but at what cost? Some of you in your lives, you have things that you're like, let's just go. And you don't realize the cost that it's putting on your family because you just want to go faster. Young people, you're in college, right? Like, this is the time. You got the most margin. Let's just do it fast. Let's do everything. I want to experience the world. I want to do all this stuff. And you don't realize that there is a cost to your pace. And that's not just a message for young people. That's all the way up. Is that we overvalue our importance, and we think if I just can go faster, it'll get done. And we don't realize that it always comes with a cost. When we tend to go fast, it's usually because we're not patient. When we tend to go fast, even with God in our lives, it's because we're not patient, because we don't truly believe that God is as good as he says he is. We don't truly believe. Like, this is the problem with Israel, right? Moses takes them out of slavery. They're in the wilderness. And every time they find themselves in trouble, they literally at night have a pillar of fire that is leading them. Like, if God is showing up as a pillar of fire, you just say, okay, I'm going to just do what you say. But they're like, no, fire's not good enough. We're going to do our own thing. like God's raining food from heaven. You can be lazy. You just have to walk around. Food shows up, fire shows up, clouds show up. You just do what you're told. And what's Israel do? Like, nah, we want to get it faster. We want to get it our way. Like, let's hit some rocks. Let's do some things. God doesn't know. And so they find themselves in trouble over and over and over again. And if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to the book of Jeremiah chapter 2. Because through many years, Israel finds themselves in this pace problem. This problem of trying to get things done fast rather than wait on God. And I think we find ourselves in the very same position. Some of you guys daily. Some of us daily. Because we just don't know how to slow down. In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 25, I was thinking about this sermon. I said, man, I really want something different, because we've all heard the messages about resting and Sabbathing, and if you've been around church, you've heard it 100 times. But there's this passage that stood out to me in the book of Jeremiah, and I love the story of Jeremiah. There's a really great book by a man named Eugene Peterson. It's called Run with Horses. I recommend it. If you're a reader, grab it. It's a great study into the book of Jeremiah and his life. But there's this passage in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 25, and I don't usually use the Message, but today I'm going to use the Message because I think sometimes it paraphrases really well. And this is what it says. It says, slow down. This is God speaking through Jeremiah to the people of Israel. It says, slow down, take a deep breath. What's the hurry? Why wear yourselves out? Just what are you after anyway? But you say, I can't help it. I'm addicted to alien gods and I can't quit. Now, I'm going to unpack the context of this verse, but it's interesting. There's this whole scene taking place, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And God shows up through Jeremiah, who is the prophet. And he doesn't show up and condemn them and say, I am God, do what I say. No, he shows up, and in the very first words that he says through Jeremiah is slow down. What are you doing? He begins to ask them questions. And in the context, if you read the beginning of Jeremiah chapter 2, what we see happening is that Israel, in their, you can call it rebellion or anxiousness or whatever, they find themselves worshiping other gods. They find themselves in a position where they're worshiping a very specific God, and it's because they don't think God's going to come through. So you have women that want to get pregnant, right? And so they trust God, they're asking God, they go to the priest, they're doing their thing, but God isn't showing up in the time that they want. And so they say, well, God's not doing anything, but there's this fertility God over here. Maybe I'll go and worship Baal. And they begin worshiping these other gods because God's timing, and if you catch where I'm going with this, God's timing is not good enough for them. And so they're bouncing around and they're worshiping these alien gods, these other gods. They're filling their life with these things because they're saying, I want what I want now, and God isn't giving it to me, so maybe Baal will. And Jeremiah shows up in the midst of this as Israel is worshiping these fertility gods and doing all of these things. And if I were God, I'd step in and be like, you all, and just smite a bunch of, like, right? Like that's how most of us would operate. But God in his goodness shows up and he says, stop. Slow down. What are you doing? Take a breath. Why are you in such a hurry? And I think his response is intentional and specific. How often have we all been in this place where we're just trying to fill our lives because we want the result now? So we're like, I need money. I'll just go and get it. Credit card, right? Instant, cha-ching, right? Like I can have it all now. Like we are in now culture. Like I go to Chick-fil-A and I'm upset that I have to wait in the line. I'm like, come on, y'all should be expediting me through here. You're Chick-fil-A. We don't like to wait for anything. This is Israel in this moment. And God is not moving how they see fit, and so they say, let's get it faster. And if you know the story, it leads to destruction. It leads to them completely abandoning. Israel finds themselves going to other gods, trying to get what they want. And they start worshiping all of these gods. And the whole time, God is saying, slow down. Now, I started looking at that passage, and I started asking the question, why would God say slow down? Out of all the things God could say, like he's God. He could just rain down like locusts or something, or he can do anything he wants. But his words are intentional. He says, slow down, pay attention. It's on purpose. He says, take a breath. God is pleading through Jeremiah to his people. He's pleading with them to slow down. I'm in the soccer analogies today, so that's where we're at. So hang with me. If you hate soccer, I'm sorry. I know it's football day, but that's the real football. And have you ever watched a soccer team and ever heard a coach say, slow down the game? Have you ever seen, have you ever watched professional soccer? And maybe kindergarten's weird. They just run all over the place. But if you ever watch professional soccer, they slow down the game. Everybody, they have a way of passing. They're passing the wrong way. Like, if you don't understand soccer, it looks confusing. Like, why are they going toward their goal? There is a strategy to slowing down the game. Now, some of it is to burn time, because that's how soccer works. There's no timeouts or anything. Clock just goes. But there's a strategy to slowing down to get your vision right. When you slow down the game, you can begin to strategically place your team on the field. And every pass is not by chance. It is with purpose when they pass the ball, because what they are doing is they are setting up the team to score. When you slow down, it sets you up for success. So when I read this and I see God saying, slow down, take a deep breath, get your vision right, what he's really saying is like a good father, he's coming along his children, and he knows that we can't help ourselves. And so he doesn't come in trying to correct them. He comes in saying, let's get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is you're moving so fast, you can't get your vision right. You can't make intentional moves. And so maybe in this room, maybe you're not worshiping fertility gods, right? Like maybe that's not a real thing. Maybe you're not filling your life trying to move fast, and you're not worshiping other gods or doing, maybe you are, we can talk. But maybe that's probably not as prevalent today. But I think we worship other gods in other ways. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's success. Maybe it's whatever. Maybe you're saying, if I just have this, if I go out and I work and I if I can get my 401k to this amount, I'm set up. I'm successful. If I have this house, if I have this thing, if I fill my life, maybe you're worshiping your children and you're like, we got to go, we got to do everything, we got to and you don't realize the destruction that is happening around you. And God, like a good father, is looking over you and saying, slow down. Get your vision right. Why are you in a hurry? The same message he's saying to Israel, I believe, is very relevant today, because I think we fill our lives with all sorts of gods. We fill our lives with all sorts of things. Why? Because we want to go fast. And God is pleading with us. Don't look for the fast. You're falling away from your purpose. Don't get to what you want, because it's not going to lead you to where you need to be. It's similar to what Jesus says in the book of John, chapter 15. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. Because Jesus pleads for the same thing in a different way. It's the same plead, just different wording. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and they're trying to see, they're always measuring, they're always trying to see who's the greatest, who can do things, how they can achieve more. And Jesus sits them down and he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. It's the same thing Jeremiah says. It's the same thing that God is saying in the book of Jeremiah, that if you don't slow down, if you don't take a breath, if you don't get your vision right, if you don't begin to listen to me and trust me, you will achieve nothing. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what promotion you have. It doesn't matter what career you have. If it's not connected to me, it's useless. Jesus is saying the same thing. Jesus is saying that your fruit is a direct result of what vine you are connected to in your life. Are you just trying to get as much fruit? Because you ever seen crabapple trees? You ever eaten crab apples? Those things are nasty. Mess with kids. Give them something. They'll get bellyache and the whole thing. But like, we used to throw, never mind. I'm not going to tell you what we used to do. But like, you can produce a lot of fruit, and it doesn't mean it's good fruit. You can produce a lot of something. Like we grew tomatoes this year. We have so many tomatoes, but they're all green. None of them even ripened because we had too many of them. So you do the paper bag trick, turn red. But anyway, that doesn't help my sermon. You can produce a lot of fruit, but if the vine isn't good, the fruit can be bad. And Jesus is laying this out, this rhythm. He's teaching how to be connected to the Father, because here's the thing. God has given us a structure for pace so that it is life-giving. Jesus understood this. Jeremiah understood this, that God has already given us the structure. God has already given you the structure in your life for the right pace so that your life can produce the most fruit. And it is not going fast. Most of the time, it is going far slower than most of us like. Jesus is laying this out. Jesus is pushing this idea to slow down, to take a breath. And God has been pleading with humanity since creation to slow down. What happens in Genesis 1? I love it. Most of the Bible you can tie back to Genesis 1. What happens to Adam and Eve? They walk with God, they talk with God. It's just like Israel, the pillar of fire, except they got real God, real life, physical God, hanging out with them in the garden. God is not giving them what they want as fast as they want it. So what do they say? We're going to go eat from the tree because we want to know what God knows. We want to go faster. And God is pleading with them, why am I not enough? God is pleading with humanity because he just wants to be with you. He just wants to sit with you. He just wants to connect with you. There's a balance in the beginning of Genesis 1 up until the tree. What did it say? God created the heavens and the earth, and man and woman, and it said he was with them. He walked with them. He spent time with them. He abided with humanity because he just desired to be connected with them. They were with the Father, and they connected. They're sitting in the garden. But this is what I want. This is what I'm not saying. Some of you are like, okay, I'll slow down. I'll nap all the time. I ain't doing nothing. I'm quitting my job today. Adam and Eve were still productive in the garden. Adam had jobs. Eve had a job. They still did things. Productivity is biblical. But their productivity only happened in their life out of being with God. They were connected to the right vine. They were connected to the right branch. And when you're connected to the right branch, you create the right fruit. So Jews, early Jewish culture, even Jews today, Jews have a deep understanding of this idea. Have you ever seen, we used to go to a Jewish camp. We'd rent it on the weekends. And they would literally be like, you can rent our camp, but on Saturday, no one's going to be here. You guys are on your own. And we would go to this camp, and they would literally leave all the lights on. Like, they were strict. Like, we don't turn a light switch off. We don't do anything. So, like, the whole camp would be lit up on Friday night because they aren't touching anything. They were strict about the Sabbath. Jews in their culture, they recognize the Sabbath. They reflect on this idea of being productive out of rest. So they view the rest as essential, not just something you get to do. You don't just get to rest. It is essential that you rest because the only way you are productive, according to Genesis 1, is out of your rest. So in Jewish culture, they begin their day at sundown. I found this so interesting as I was studying Sabbath and what Jews do. They don't begin their day when the sun comes up in the morning. When the sun sets at night is when their day begins. And it really shifted my view of rest. They don't view it like I get to go to bed because I worked hard today. They say I get to go to bed so that I can be productive tomorrow. So when the sun sets, they step into their rest so that they can be productive for God in the days ahead. Isn't that so different than our culture today? Right? Like, we're the everybody's working for the weekend culture, right? We work all week. If we do enough, I can get to Friday. I can get to Saturday. And this is where I get to begin to enter into rest. But according to the Jews, according to Genesis 1, is that when you rest, it prepares you for what God has for you ahead. What if we started living this way? What if we started operating this way? What if we found such deep rest and contentment in God, if we found our purpose in Him so that we can be productive in the days ahead? It takes the focus completely off of us, right? It takes the focus off of what you can do, what you can achieve. And you say, I can only achieve because of the amount of rest that I have. It's backwards, but it's this idea of John chapter 15, that if I'm connected to the vine, I'll produce the fruit. What Jesus doesn't say is that I produce the fruit and then get connected to the vine, right? He doesn't say, go out, make fruit, and that will lead you to be connected to the Father. He says, no, find your connection and produce much fruit. And we don't get that. We challenge it. We like to do things, so we go, go, go. Think of all the times you found yourself at the end of your rope. Every person in this room. Why? Because we just want to do. I was talking with a pastor just last night. He came here, and I've known him for a while. And it's funny when you get around a bunch of pastors, COVID always gets brought up, right? Like, oh, how did you do the last 2 years? They have a church plant up in Detroit. They planted around the same time as us. And we were talking last night, and I was like, oh, how'd it go? And he was like, yeah, it was hard. It was rough, like everybody says. And I was like, yeah, when we started, I tried to do all this video content, and I thought, oh, we're going to make videos for everything, and they're going to be so artsy. And I got about a month in, and I was just tired. Because I was just doing stuff to do stuff, to move fast. And it wasn't connected. It wasn't connected to the Father. And if you've ever found yourself at the end of your rope, it's usually because you're going at a pace that isn't connected to God. You're not abiding in Him, which is leading to your work. See, if we live our lives like an RPM meter, most of us would say, I'm just going to redline it till retirement. Like if I just go as hard as I can right now, we will be set up for the future so that then we will finally rest. But let me let you in on a secret with all 38 years of my knowledge. That was a joke. It's not very much, but just trust me here in this moment. You can live your life with your RPM meter in the red, but you'll get to retirement and you won't know how to shut off. And you'll go and you'll think, oh, if I just get to this point, right? Like I remember when my kids were little, I'm like, oh, as soon as they start school, we'll slow down, we'll do stuff, we'll go on date days, and I'm like, man, let me tell you, my kids went to school. It took us 2 years before I was like, wait a second, I said I was going to do all these things once they were gone. Because we just keep going and going and going, and we fill it up. And I promise you, you will burn just like your car. If you run it in the red, you'll blow the engine at some point. Because God did not make you to live at that capacity. God desires us all to find healthy rhythms of rest. We are all called to healthy daily, weekly, monthly, and annually rhythms of rest. So when God set up the Jewish calendar, it was all around this idea. There was harvesting season where they would work, but they would rest into the harvest. They would rest after the harvest. They would find rhythms that would judge. Their calendar was built around Sabbathing. What would our churches look like? What would your life look like? What would your kids look like if you built your schedule this way? Not I'm going hard all year, and when we get to the summer, that's where we retreat to the lake house. That's where we disappear. That's where we disconnect. What if we said, I'm getting the rest I need so that God can be fruitful with my life in this section of time? What if when you hit the couch at the end of the day, when you come off of a hard day's work, what if that wasn't the end of the day? What if that was the beginning? What if you're saying, I have to have this time so that I can be fruitful? Spouses, what if you didn't view date night or date time or the time you get alone away from your kids as an achievement? What if it wasn't and trust me, this took me a very long time I've been married 15 years this year. It took me 14 of those to figure this out. What if you didn't get to your date time? What if you didn't get the time that you spend alone together? What if you didn't get to the time where you're connected to one another? What if that wasn't the goal or the accomplishment? Like, we worked so hard so that we can do this thing. What if you said, we can't produce anything unless we have this time together? It will transform your marriage. It will transform your relationship. What if even our generosity? What if the way, like we've been talking about generosity and all these things, what if we view like the idea that if we sit in it, we can be more fruitful with it? If we do things like financial peace, I know that's a dirty word to some people, it's a good word to some people. But let me tell you, stewarding your finances is a good thing. I want to take my kids on vacations. I want to go in. That doesn't happen unless I take care of my money, what God has given me. So what if you, instead of saying I'll fix it once I use it, what if you say I'm going to take care of it now so that I can be the most fruitful with it? And if you don't like money, switch it out with something else. You got kids that are a jerk, spend time with them. I'm serious. Like, that's what kids are. You were a jerk one day too. Like, sit with them, invest in them, connect with them, raise them. Don't just say, I'll fix them once they're screwed up, right? That's how most of our parents did it, and it didn't work, let me tell you. I want to be fruitful with what God has given me. I want to invest in it. I want to sit in it. So find rhythms to slow down. When do you slow down during the day? Maybe you don't slow down ever. Maybe you hit the pillow, you wake up, and it's just grind, grind, grind. What's your daily rhythm of rest? When do you connect to the Father? When do you listen? When do you stop? What is your weekly rhythm? Is your schedule so full that there is no margin for anything other than go? Well, you need to change it because you're going to burn out. What's your monthly rhythm of rest? When do you stop? When do you have time as a family? When do you do things? When do you just sit? Not going to Costco because you don't know what to do with yourself. When do you just sit together? What's your annual rhythm of rest? I guarantee there are people in this room, you don't even annually rest. You just go, you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. I was sitting with a bunch of church planners. The whole first year of this church, we didn't take one vacation. I didn't miss one Sunday. We didn't miss anything. And I was like, don't do that. Because you will find yourself at the end of it drained out with nothing left for anyone. Some of y'all need to find annual, monthly, weekly, daily rhythms. Because that's how God designed you. If you don't slow down, if you don't spend time, you can never produce fruit. So here's my plea with you today. I say it all the time. We are called to one thing. It's to go into the earth, make disciples who make disciples. And maybe that's your kids. Maybe that's your roommate. Maybe that's your family. Whoever it is, God has positioned you with relationships with people to make disciples that make disciples that make disciples. Sometimes right now I'm in a season where my kids, I want to disciple them so that they can disciple other people. And maybe that's where you're at. You cannot fully live on mission unless you learn to rest. Otherwise, you're just working out of your own will. And this morning, God is pleading with us to connect to the Father, to connect to the vine, to slow down so that we can produce fruit. And so here's my challenge. John's going to lead us into a time I think we've maybe done this once ever. Usually we stand up and we go into worship and some of y'all check out and some of you move on to the next thing. We're going to slow down as a community today. We're going to slow down as a church today. I'm going to ask you not to leave until we're done. I'm going to ask you to sit in it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you hate it, even if you got somewhere to be. I know the Lions play at 1 or something. Like, that's fine. Football will wait. They're going to lose anyway. But seriously, like we will not achieve what God has called his children to be. We cannot do it separated from him. So we need to learn to abide. We need to learn to sit in his presence. And some of you need to take this message and you need to have some conversations this week. You and your spouse need to sit down and talk about how can we be more fruitful out of our rest. Not how can we produce so that we can rest. Let's get back to the way God designed it. Our productivity comes out of our slowing down. So John's going to lead us in a song. I'm going to pray. And I'm going to ask you to sit here. If you want to worship, you can stand. You can do it. Whatever you find rest in this morning, do it. If you need to pray with your spouse, if you need to get together with your family in this place, do it. If you need to just sit in silence, do it. But we are going to sit in the presence of God so that we can carry the good news out of this place. We're going to sit in His presence. We're not going to do. We are going to be with the Father. Let's be human beings, right? It's a cliche thing. Let's be human beings, not doings. So we're going to be with the Father for a few moments so that we can be fruitful. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, God, I thank you that you're a loving God, that even in as we see in the book of Jeremiah, even in our rebellion and our confusion and our dysfunction, you are still teaching, you are walking, you are pleading with us like a father who loves his children. And so this morning in this community, you are pleading with us to slow down. You are pleading with us to be connected to you. And so, God, we do that this morning. We sit in your presence. Help us to slow down for a few moments this morning. Help us to take a breath. Help us to get our vision right. Help us to set ourselves up so that we can produce the most fruit that we can. Help families define new rhythms of rest. God, I pray for the young person that doesn't know how to slow down in this room. That hasn't found that rhythm of rest, that thinks if they do and do and do, it'll accomplish, but they don't know how to sit connected to the vine. God, I pray that you would give them new eyes to see, new ears to hear. God, that you would reposition their heart right now. That their productivity would come out of their rest in you. Their abiding in you. God, give us all new eyes to see and ears to hear this morning, so that we can advance your kingdom. God, I pray that my life, God, I pray that every person in this room, their life would be a life of fruit, but it would be fruit that is connected to the vine of who you are. In Jesus' name.